So one of the main things what I'm going to do in this project is to talk about narrative and what is narrative photography. And as you all know, human beings have been telling stories with images from the beginning of time. And our earliest, most significant events were always recorded as cave paintings or petroglyphs. And even when we develop languages, we continue to communicate visually through drawings and paintings and sculpture. And even our scripts, they arrived from pictorial references. So it was much later in the 19th century that that we started telling our stories through photography. So this project is essentially going to be about what is a narrative, and go on to talk about what is narrative photography. And I cannot emphasize enough on the power and impact of visuals in communication by virtue uh, I can't emphasize the impact that visuals have on our day-to-day life today. And a narrative is always in the context of something, particularly in today's time of when images are so easily accessible and circulated. And here I want to talk a bit about David Campbell and how we emphasized that, narrative photography, within that, how the narrative is related to the idea of context. And context becomes extremely important. And that is what I really want to emphasize during the project, that, what you include in a context or what you exclude, sometimes what you exclude is more important. So it's very important to understand context when it comes to narrative photography. So here, when I talk about the impact, I'm hoping that there will be many layers of impact when this project is being taught and when it's being learned, not only for the mentees, but also for myself, because, I learned photography on the road on my own. And when I'm teaching, it's also a huge learning experience for me, because a lot of students bring in their own experiences. And for all of us, our experiences are very, what you call, unique and different. And what I want to emphasize again here is that when you're making a picture, the time that one actually spends making that picture is far less. It is a process of actually arriving when you finally make that picture, which is more important. And all photographers, even if it's a mobile camera, you're coming in a position of privilege and power. So the idea is, how do you actually sort of disintegrate that position of power and try and become equal with the people that you're photographing? And I think one of the biggest impacts would be that a person who's making pictures cannot just pick up the phone or the camera to make a picture. There is an effort, a genuine effort to try and understand more about the peoples, about the culture, about the society, and learn how to collaborate and not just. It's like having a dialogue and not just a monologue. So that is one of the biggest impacts that I hope this project and this training will sort of uh, have on the learners. Now, I'm hoping that there'll be a set of skills that the students will learn. One is communication, and our understanding of the cultural anthropology of people from the Neolithic era comes mostly from cave paintings. So I'm assuming that people will learn how to communicate in a much better way, not only just through the pictures that they're making, but like I said earlier, through the process of making those pictures. Because what is happening is, over the last 10 years or so, social media has made us such introverts that people are usually living lives looking at pictures, looking at the screen, but not having a lot of interaction in real life. So I'm hoping that by the virtue of wanting to make pictures, people will be forced out of their comfort zone to step out into the real world and interact with people on a more human level. Of course, in the process, I'm hoping that people will become creative, because photography is a medium which allows you to express yourself, express your own emotions. And just like a writer is well equipped with words, a photographer is a person who makes photographs and is better in expressing one's emotions. Um, when it comes to innovation, in today's world, especially because the world is bombarded with billions of images that are being produced, and the whole idea is to try and practice and strive to be original. Self-awareness. The idea is that when you start interacting with people of who are not, just your friends or your family or your neighborhood, but when you start interacting with people outside of your comfort zone, you're not looking just at your own issues, but you're looking at new issues. And in that process, you become aware of how to become a person who can try and resolve those issues, but maybe that's even too much to expect. But also, you become aware of your own privileges, and you perhaps try and understand what are other things going around you. So, every narrative is based on the perspective the photographer takes. So, the question is, what will your perspective be? How are you going to tell your story? Um, Empathy, well, a person can't empathize, especially after having worked with people across all spectrums of life and then seeing life through their perspective. Then, if you can't empathize, then you're certainly in the wrong trade. I mean, living as a human being, you need to be able to empathize. So, week one will be about basically about taking pictures, and every photographer has a toolbox. And the whole idea is to learn how to use your camera, whether it's a mobile or a DSLR, and use various creative controls such as composition, light, color, contrast, focus, and other things to try and see how you're going to make the best picture and craft images that tells the story that you want to tell, specifically that what you have in mind. Week two will actually be about identifying the project that you want to work on, and also the basic fundamentals that one has to keep in mind while making that visual narrative. And I can't emphasize enough as to how much research and planning goes into making a photograph or a photo story. We'll also talk about a single photograph versus a photo series. We'll talk about emotions. We'll talk about images, how they need to be layered with meaning. And I'll also talk about a variety in the way you tell a specific story. I mentioned originality. I talked about building a narrative. The first question will be, what is my story? Then, who is the audience for your work? Who are you making the work for? So there'll be many things that one will have to keep in mind while working on a story. uh, Week three will also be about taking pictures back to the people that you photographed, because photographers have a tendency कि photo liya और चले गए, never going back to the people that they photographed. But the idea is to collaborate. The idea is to have a dialogue, to make the pictures, bring it back to the people that you photographed, discuss it with them, show it to them, ask them, are we representing you the right way? Would you like us to represent you in some other way? Use semiotics and, basically move beyond just making a beautiful and pretty picture, but at the same time, lending respect to the person that you're photographing or the community that you're photographing. The last week we'll be working on a longer narrative, because early in the first 3 weeks we'll just talk about basic photo or photo story. But when you work in a longer project, what do you do? So I've been working on one of the longest stories that I've been working on is Lakshmi, and she's a hijra that I started photographing in 2003, and I still continue to photograph her. So all these years, I mean, she has evolved, I have evolved, her life has changed, my life has changed. The way I used to take a picture 20 years ago, it's very different than what I do today. So I will talk about how does one do that. And there's nothing right or nothing wrong in this. It's all about how do you look at the person, the community that you're photographing, and at the end of it, how much respect are you lending to that person or community? And then um, yeah, like I said, we'll learn how to make good photographs. We'll understand what it is to make a narrative. And most important, one will learn some social skills and or become more sensitive to people who you're not communicating with or uh, working with in your usual lives. And in the process, build empathy.